Well, I finally managed to kick off my Blake and Mortimer project I said I would start back in January. Yeah, I know it's October. But I read the first Blake and Mortimer story Edgar P. Jacobs made, and that is The Secret of the Swordfish. Hi, I'm Annie, and I must admit I found The Secret of the Swordfish a quite entertaining read, I must admit. But some elements, well, they did not age very well. At one point I was thinking, hey, Mortimer, steady on, old boy. That's not necessary. But, it was first published in 1946. So that was, and it is only one remark. But I will get into that in a bit. So, first of all, who are Blake and Mortimer? Well, Philip Mortimer is a British nuclear physicist, and he is not only very intelligent and brilliant at inventing stuff, but he's also very brave. Like he can handle torture very well. So, and that is always a good thing to have around if you have secrets to hide. And as he is the inventor of this secret weapon, the swordfish, he definitely needs to withstand all of the torture. And he is also very brave, as he is not afraid to make the first test drive in his invention. Test flight, I must say. Captain Francis Blake is a former RAF pilot, but he is currently an MI5 secret agent. And it goes without saying that he is also very brave, and he has a lot of he is skilled in combat. Back in the late 1940s, early 1950s, comics often had to have this super villain. So Blake and Mortimer also have this super villain they have to battle against in, I think, almost every album adventure they embark upon. So, and that is Colonel Ulrich. Now, the nationality of Ulrich has always been a bit of a mystery, but and Jacobs never made it really clear what his nationality is. But his name does make me suspect it's maybe something he comes from Eastern Europe or something. Anyway, enemies were often foreign back in the 1940s, 1950s. And Ulrich is in this story working for this evil emperor, this Mongolian emperor dictator kind of fellow man, and he is really a cruel kind of dictator. Well, dictators are most of the time cruel. So he is not an exception. I must make it clear that this story is a science fiction story. The Secret of the Swordfish is a science fiction story, but it's really also a regular war story. So this Asian dictator, with the help of Ulrich, has destroyed every major city in the world and has gotten, world domination. That is the goal. But there are still all over the world resistance groups that he needs to strike down. He needs to crush. But his misfortune is that Blake and Mortimer are working on this secret weapon which will free all of the oppressed people all over the world. To explain why some elements did not age very well, we need to get back to when this comic was first published. The Secret of the Swordfish was published in serialized form for the weekly magazine Tintin, and that was published the first issue was published in 1946, and the last issue was published in 1949, and in 1952 the story was published in 2 albums, and later they were reprinted, I think back in 1984, in 3 volumes. So going back to the Society of 1946, I think the Yellow Peril was still a big thing. I think the Yellow Peril, the fear of Asiatic countries and Asiatic people and Asiatic economy, and people in the West found Asiatic people and nations a threat back then, and I think it started in the late 1800s. But I think in 1946, when The Secret of the Swordfish was first published, this was still a big thing, and I think the World War II was just finished, and the bombing of Nagasaki and what's the other city? Well, I don't know, but the 2 cities in Japan with nuclear weapons was still fresh in people's minds, because, well, you could see the Japanese, well, they took some convincing to stop fighting in the Second World War, because and the soldiers, the fierceness of the Japanese soldiers, especially the kamikaze pilots, well, they must have been frightening. They must have been really, really terrifying. So that was still fresh in the minds of people. So the Yellow Peril, the fear of Asiatic countries and people, well, was still fresh in the people's minds. And I don't know if it was for Belgium the case. I don't think it was for Belgium the case, as they didn't have many Asiatic colonies. I think back in 1946. I'm not sure, but they had none or very few, I think. But other countries like Great Britain, they had Asiatic colonies, and there was also the fear of the original inhabitants of these countries wanting independence and starting a revolt or an uprising. Well, that was also a fear, because, well, these countries didn't want to lose their colonies. Well, because most of the time they had stuff that they wanted, like spices and like I don't know, diamonds and whatever. I don't know. But they had, they were a real asset to to these countries to maintain as colonies. But I don't think this was the case for Belgium, but the atmosphere of the Yellow Peril was also in Belgium, was also in Belgium to be found. And like I said, they just finished fighting the Second World War, and back in 1946 most enemies were foreign, so it's not really in adventure stories, so it's not really strange that in war stories the enemies were always foreign. But I think the war stories have evolved into more if you read war stories that are written nowadays, the story more concentrates on inner conflicts and the morality of war than a foreign enemy. And you didn't have that back in 1946. That was all. Most of the time the enemy was foreign. The Secret of the Swordfish was unique in its kind as when it was first published. As I remember correctly, it was the first serious, realistic adventure comic in color with text balloons that contained so many pages. One story contained so many pages. I think over 140 pages. I think 143 pages in total. So that was absolutely new back in 1946. And looking at the illustrations, you can see Jacobs worked for Tintin creator Hergé before starting making his own comics. He drew most of the times the realistic settings in the Tintin comics, but when he made his own comics, like for example the Blake and Mortimer comics and the comic he made, the U-Ray he made, wasn't a Blake and Mortimer comic, but he made that comic before the first Blake and Mortimer comic. You can see that in Tintin the characters are a bit more cartoonish, but the setting is realistic. And in Blake and Mortimer, in Jacobs' comics, he also draws the characters realistic. And you can see Jacobs was really a perfectionist, as many of the airplanes were based on real existing airplanes, but made more futuristic, more science fiction, where the basis were most of the time derived from existing airplanes. Like for example, the Swordfish is based upon the Douglas X-3 Stiletto airplane, and the details and talking about the details of the illustrations, the scenes where Blake and Mortimer travel through a lot of foreign countries, are very atmospheric and detailed as well. You can see he was a perfectionist on every level. I found The Secret of the Swordfish an entertaining read, although sometimes Jacobs does get a little bit carried away with over-explaining things, like explaining technical stuff, which I think, that's not really necessary for the development of the story. but he probably wanted to show off that he did do his research for this story. So you have to give him that. But is it necessary? Not really. And the one remark Mortimer made is a bit outdated. Very outdated. But the story has a lot of fun plot twists and turns, and I think the illustrations are just great. So all in all, keeping in mind that The Secret of the Swordfish was written and made in 1946, I can highly recommend this comic. I can highly recommend it. It is really an entertaining read in my opinion. So keep reading European comics, and I hope to see you in the next video.